The Three Spinners. Once in the craftsman quarter of a small town lived a woman with her daughters. The woman earned her living by spinning yarn, which she sold to tailors in the market. And when the oldest of her daughters was old enough to work, the mother asked her daughter to help with the work. The young daughter knew from her mother what a laborious life awaited her. And worst of all, she despised spinning. She disliked the craft and couldn't match her mother's skill. Even her younger siblings seemed more talented with the spindle. Out of defiance and frustration, the young woman threw her mother's spindle into a corner, protesting that she didn't want to become a spinner. Her mother's anger flared. She had shown the girl countless times how to work with the spindle, but nothing had helped. In life, nothing is given to you. You will have to work if you want to live, she scolded. However, her daughter remained defiant, sulking by the window. This only angered the mother further, and in her rage, she slapped the girl. The girl wept bitterly, and the argument between them escalated. At the same time, the queen of the land was passing through the quarter in her splendid carriage. She wanted to buy the latest fabrics and clothes at the market when she heard the quarrel between the mother and daughter. Curious, she approached the weaver's doorstep and knocked. Surprised by the high-ranking visitor, the mother was at loss for words, while the daughter continued to stand with tears in her eyes. "What is this argument about?" the queen asked curiously. Shame overcame the weaver. She didn't want to reveal her daughter's laziness and incompetence to the noble lady, so she replied, "My daughter is obsessed with spinning. She is so engrossed in her work that she cannot stop. But I am a poor woman and don't have much flax to spin, so I got angry with the child." The queen was completely surprised by this explanation. She knew how difficult it was to find diligent and skilled spinners. And since her demand for fabrics and clothes was almost endless, she responded, "I'm pleased to hear that you're so diligent, my child. And if that's your problem, I will take you with me to the palace. There, you will receive so much flax that you can spin to your heart's content. It'll benefit both of us. Do you agree, dear mother, if I take your daughter with me?" The woman agreed without hesitation. She hoped to strike a good deal for her daughter. Upon arriving at the palace, the young woman was led to 3 large rooms in the tower. Each room was filled from top to bottom with the finest flax. The young girl was speechless and breathless at the sight. She could not have spun this much flax, even if she had lived for 300 years and spun from morning till night every day. This task was simply impossible. As the queen left, she turned to her and said, "Now spin this flax for me, and if you manage to process all of it, you shall have my eldest son as your husband. You may be poor and not noble of birth, but if you carry such diligence within you, it can only benefit our realm." Left alone in the chamber, the young girl began to cry bitterly. She wanted nothing more than to escape a life of spinning. But now she was faced with this insurmountable task, and worse still, the prospect of spending her whole life spinning. If she could even produce a single thread. On the first and second days, nothing worked for her. She pondered desperately for a solution. On the third day, she attempted to process the flax into yarn. However, the work didn't go well. Without her mother's guidance, she was even more inept than before. She hid her pitiful attempts in the chamber when she heard someone approaching the tower. It was the Queen Mother, coming to inquire about the young woman's progress. Disappointed and surprised, she saw that the young woman hadn't even started her task. In her desperation, the girl apologized and explained that the separation from her mother and siblings had saddened her so much that she couldn't begin her work. The Queen Mother was skeptical, but allowed her this lapse. With a stern expression, she warned, "You must start working tomorrow. Otherwise, you will leave the town and the palace." Then the Queen Mother left the chamber again. The young girl paced the tower, pondering a solution, but nothing came to her. She would be driven out of the palace, and she wouldn't be able to return to her mother. Her mother would never forgive her for this disgrace. She approached the window of her chamber and looked into the distance. Where could she go? What could she do? She wondered in despair. Then she noticed 3 ugly women with their cart on the street below the tower. The women appeared to have dragged the heavy cart into the town themselves, and they were arguing loudly. The tallest had a broad, flat foot and hardly any teeth in her mouth. The second had a huge lower lip that hung down to her chin. The smallest of them had a broad thumb and squinted her right eye, contorting her face even more. The young woman observed the wild scene of the 3 women with a curious gaze. One of the women noticed her staring and snapped, "What are you staring at from the tower?" The young woman was surprised by the women's forthright manner and wanted to withdraw from the window. However, her despair urged her to tell the 3 women about her impossible task. The 3 women listened intently to what the young woman recounted. Then the smallest of them motioned the other 2 closer, and they huddled together in whispered conversation. The tallest woman with a flat foot then turned towards her and shouted, "If you invite us to the wedding, let us sit at the bridal couple's table and introduce us as your cousins without being ashamed of us. Then we will help you spin the flax." "But how can you process all this flax in such a short time?" asked the young woman. "Ha!" giggled the woman with the hanging lower lip. "We can do much more than that." The young woman gratefully accepted their help and instructed the 3 women to come up to the tower. The 3 women collected their things from the cart and limped up the tower stairs. When they reached the top, the smallest of them pushed the young woman into a corner. "We need space here. Sit in that corner and don't disturb us." With wide eyes, the young woman sat in the corner of the chamber and marveled at the spectacle. Grumbling and muttering, the 3 women set up their workstations. They exchanged harsh whispers, but were, as one had to admit, a well-coordinated team. One pulled the thread and turned the wheel, the second moistened the thread, and the third twirled it around her finger on the table and smacked it with the palm of her hand. Each time she did this, some threads of the spun yarn fell to the ground. The yarn was of the finest quality and spun so delicately that no other person could achieve it. They processed the flax from the 3 rooms and worked tirelessly. They didn't take a break and toiled through the entire night. Finally, all the yarn was spun, and the 3 women packed up their things again. As they were leaving, the tallest woman approached the young woman once more and said, "Don't forget what you promised us, and if you keep your word, your wish will also come true." With these enigmatic words, the 3 grumbling women disappeared. Speechless and bewildered by their strange promise, the young woman simply nodded and thanked the grumpy women. She watched them from the window as they hobbled down the street, cursing and complaining. Once again, the Queen Mother came to see the progress of the young woman. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw an incredible amount of spun yarn in the 3 chambers of the tower. She presented the miracle to the king and the prince, who now had the chance to meet his industrious future bride. Everyone was impressed and speechless by the young woman's accomplishment. The prince beamed at his future bride with joy, as he too was completely enchanted by her. So the wedding of the couple was arranged, and everyone was in high spirits. True to her promise, the young woman turned to the Queen Mother and said, "I have 3 cousins, and since they have done so much good for me in my life, I would like to ask if they can sit at my bridal table. Would you allow me that?" "Why shouldn't we allow it?" the Queen Mother asked, and the young bride smiled at her warmly. When the celebration took place and all the distinguished guests arrived, 3 strange women in peculiar attire eventually joined the party. The gathering looked at the women with surprise and disdain, but the bride was in good spirits. She went, as promised, to the 3 women, welcoming them warmly. She led them to their places and introduced them as her 3 cousins. Grim and Shirley, the 3 women took their seats at the festive table. As usual, they squabbled with each other and remained grumpy as ever. But they respected that the young woman had invited and treated them as she had promised. However, the young prince was shocked by their presence. He wondered, where did these ugly and ill-tempered women come from? He approached the tallest woman and asked, "Honored lady, why do you have such a broad foot?" "Honored lady? Pah, from treading, of course." Then he went to the second woman and asked, "Why do you have that hanging lip?" "From licking," she replied matter-of-factly. Confused and bewildered by the answers of the first 2 women, the groom finally approached the third woman and asked, "Why do you have such a broad thumb, a squinted eye, and such a wide hand?" The smallest of the women looked at him with her grimace and said, "I must keep the thread in my eye and twist it with my finger and strike it with the flat of my hand." As she said this, she slapped the table with the flat of her hand, and the 3 women burst into mocking laughter. Thus, the prince decided that his beautiful bride would never have to spin a thread again in her life. And so, as foretold, her secret wish came true. Her life had been forever changed by the oddly grotesque women who had helped her, and the fairy kingdom itself would soon be forever changed as well. By the way, with a subscription, you won't miss any of our fairy tales. And feel free to write us in the comments which fairy tale is your favorite.